Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is... yes.
This is Attin. It tastes like ashy dust. It's a lot like my home planet, actually.
Initiating babysitting sequence. Come on, baby. Onto the shit, baby.
This weapon still works from the old days. Its strength is what keeps us safe here.
This isn't fair. You shouldn't have to be at war all the time.
At A2. And these are galactic coordinates.
Look, there's more.
That's at Akron. Those are the coordinates that Kim gave us to this system.
Here's at Aricia. Here's at a rabbit. At a coda here. Guys, I found an
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Well, hello there, friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi. I'm your host, Dan Zehr, delighted to have a Star Wars conversation with you. Since May 2013, I've been committed to creating a positive, family-friendly, spoiler-free place for our Star Wars community. Picture this, you're in your favorite coffee shop and you hear this lively discussion about Star Wars films, Disney Plus live action, animation, books, comics, collectibles, or Star Wars experiences at the Disney theme parks. I want you to feel like you hear that conversation, you sit down and you're right there as a part of it. I want to bring that sense of community to this podcast, the website, coffeewithkenobi.com, special events, live video experiences, email newsletter, and more. Join the Star Wars community at coffeewithkenobi.com and be part of something really special. A huge thank you to the official travel partner of Coffee with Kenobi, MEI and Mousefan Travel. Check out coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel for a no-cost, no-obligation quote and let them know Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zehr sent you. And you may have seen it on social media, but Disney Cruise Lines is offering a 50% off your deposit for cruises extending through June. And guess what? The Star Wars, I guess it is Star Wars. There is a Star Wars experiences on the Disney Wish, and Coffee with Kenobi and me and Mousefan Traveler are going June 16th to the 20th on the Disney Wish, and we want you to be a part of that. Go to coffeewithkenobi.com/DisneyWish and ask for your no-cost, no-obligation quote. We hope to see you and experience this incredible, one-of-a-kind Star Wars cruise experience with you. On today's show, Tom Gross and Father Jimmy join me to talk about the 4th episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. So, pull up a chair, grab your favorite mug, and have some coffee with Kenobi. One quick note before we jump into the conversation with Tom and Father Jimmy about the 4th episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. Next Tuesday is Christmas Eve, and Tuesday after that is New Year's Eve. And it's going to be really difficult for the three of us to get together and schedule our normal interview, conversation, Coffee with Kenobi chat, whatever you want to call it. So next week's shows, for the first time, are not going to come out on Thursdays like you were used to because of the holiday season. But I've always said family first. Plus, Father Jimmy, of course, is a priest, and he is going to be very busy during that time of year as well. So the new shows for the next 2 weeks are going to come out on Friday instead of Thursday, but we hope that it will be worth the wait for you. So now, on to the show. Hello, friends. We are back to talk about the 4th episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. The episode is Can't Say I Remember No Attin. You probably recognize that expression because we heard it a lot over the first couple episodes from SM33. But by the way, my name is Dan Zehr, and I'm thrilled to be back here talking with you about this show. And yes, I can't say I remember no Attin may be familiar. You know what else is familiar? These two co-hosts that I have with me as we travel back home to Attin to find our lost treasure. First, from Teachers in the Dungeon, a treasure, Teachers in the Dungeon Networks, Tom Gross.
Yeah, hello. It's great to be here. What fun. And I can't say that I remember no Attin either.
Yeah, well, you know what? You're in good company, I would say. Also, Neel is a very popular character in Star Wars. He's got this really nice blue coiffed hair. Father Jimmy's hair is not blue, but it is very well coiffed. And we bring him back to the show. Father Jimmy, how are you?
Great to be back. What a beautiful introduction. One of the first things I noticed about Neel was his very well done side part. I appreciate Neel for that very much, and I'm glad that that's spreading.
Have you ever been introduced in such grandiose fashion?
No, this is the most grandiose. Grandioseness.
I'm very sorry about that. I hope we can make that better for you. And I'm sure we will next time. All right, guys, as we do, we're going to give one word to describe the episode. I've thought probably more about this one word than I have with a lot of things with this style overview for anything, whether it's Star Wars or what have you. But give me one word to describe. Can't say I remember no Attin, and overall thoughts on the episode. Tom, let's have you go first.
Yeah, well, before we came on, I said I had something really exciting I wanted to share with you about this, and it has to do with my word, because I now have someone at home who's watching the Skeleton Crew with me, and I haven't watched the Star Wars show with her since before Bad Batch. It's my daughter, my oldest daughter. I said, "Can you watch the Star Wars show with me?" I said, "It's very different. I think you're really going to like it." And my whole family started watching, and I was so excited. And my wife fell asleep, and she woke up somewhere toward the end of the episode, and she goes, there are no pirates. Because you slept through all of them, but nonetheless. So my word is actually not my word. My word is my daughter's word, and I think it fits very well. And so she said nerve-wracking. And I said, "Why would you say nerve-wracking? That's an interesting word." And she goes, "Dad, they're so close so many times. And it's nerve-wracking because this is the first episode where they faced real danger." And I said, "That's fair." And I like it. And to me, that's nerve-wracking. So I'm going with that. And that's my impression. They're so close, so many times. So there we go.
That's a great start. And a shout out to Kaylee for assisting with that. She assisted with, I helped her with the bad Christmas jokes for announcements this week too. So
I know.
What a nice little exchange there. Father Jimmy, what about you? One word to describe this episode and overall reactions.
Yeah, I feel like Tom should have probably gone last with his one word in that story, because I've been kind of waffling, trying to figure out a good one word, but I think I finally settled on courage. I think a lot of things took courage in this episode, and not just the sort of courage to go into battle or to face the very real danger, but there is some other kind of emotional courage, kind of character courage that gets revealed through there as well. But overall, I liked this episode a lot.
Okay.
It was very good, a lot of fun.
And that's a pretty important buzzword for this episode with Neel, I would say, especially. In fact, on stars.com today, it said, "Is Neel the bravest member of the Skeleton Crew?" And it said, yes, absolutely, no doubt. There was no other way to vote him not being. My one word to describe this fourth episode is disillusioned. This entire episode, they're all disillusioned with who they are and where they are and what is going on. The role of SM33 becomes a little hazy. Jod is suddenly someone who they are surprised they can trust, and he just does it very matter-of-factly. But I'm also a little disillusioned with this episode for some of the direction, and it certainly pivoted my anticipation. Not in a bad way. It just really threw me for a loop, which I like. And I'm also not sure where I sit with, which is why I'm a little bit disillusioned. But I'm very comfortable with that, and I look forward to talking about that with the both of you. Tom, what is something that you want to talk about that stands out from the episode?
Yeah, so Jod is who I want to talk about it because.
And by the way, Gar Van Orden on CWK Cafe, he pointed out that we kept saying it was Jode instead of Jod, and he apologized for correcting us. Which, by the way, Gar, we appreciate it. We love you. We look. I'm not going to speak for these two, but I can be a bozo, and if I mess up, I appreciate you letting me know. I appreciate that.
100%. No apologies necessary. I appreciate it because it's nice to say that someone's name correctly. So Jod.
Yes.
So Jod becomes something that I wasn't expecting to become. And then at the end, I go, wait a minute, why did I question? And he kind of sent me through a lot of things, but I think there's a definite clear reason for it. But let me talk about what kind of, using your word, Dan, disillusioned me regarding Jod, is that he's sneaking around the ship when the kids step off and comes across the Republic credits that Wim has been carrying around with him, and SM-33 catches him and said, thief, and really starts getting kind of rough with him. And then I was a little confused there. Did he just not recognize that it was Jod, or did he just have protocols that someone's stealing, so he just calls him a thief, but then he sort of realized who it was and settled down a bit. But pardon me. So the rest of the episode until the very end, anytime Jod was on screen, I was trying to see him honestly, but I felt like he was just always being so, like, I don't know, elusive and very unclear about why he was doing the things that he was doing. And so I was really kind of frustrated by that. But I feel like the reasoning behind that, though, is we really needed the kids to find themselves. And so what better way to get Jod sort of out of the picture than putting him into a position where he and SM-33, because really we need to get SM-33 out of the way as well, because the kids needed to not rely on them through most of this episode. And so the two of them are kind of goofing around, but we also learned some things about SM-33 that we can save for later. But so it really set me off. Sort of, I want to trust Jod so much. And we talked about this a lot our last episode, about where does he stand with things. And this really took me the wrong direction and I think I can go ahead and say it, until the very end, when he brings the beasts back to the Troik tribe. So yeah, Jod has been intriguing to me.
So a couple of things on that. One, I think SM-33 is thief behavior. I think that was the story nugget to tell us he's a little bit malfunctioning.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how I interpreted it. And that's why the ending makes more sense. Because the way he's sort of stuttering and stammering and seems confused. Yeah. And then, because we've seen him be playful before with Jod, before he threatens him. But then we see this. And with Jod, I think I can give you some peace on this. Look, when he found that money, is he clever enough that he could have turned off SM-33 or deactivated him and threw him off the ship or whatever and left with that money in the ship without the kids? Absolutely. I think he's shown he's not a sociopath. I mean, it doesn't seem that way. Does he greedy? Does he like treasure? Yeah. But he uses some of the money he earns, at least that's what he tells us, to get those EOPs, which is pretty cool. We get to see the EOPs, by the way, from the Phantom Menace and the Obi-Wan Kenobi series. So I sort of like that part as well. Father Jimmy, you want to comment on that, or do you have something else you'd want to bring up?
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting way to intro Jod for this episode, to kind of show where he's at. I don't blame him for kind of snooping around the ship. He's been locked down under babysitter mode.
That was great.
A droid who's pretty capable of taking people out. And if I'm on a pirate ship, I would probably start poking around as well. But yeah, the fact that he finds the credits, he kind of hides them from SM-33, and then we don't really hear from him again until he shows up with the EOP kind of closer to the end of the episode. And yeah, I think the way he showed up then later, to me, was one of the reasons I said growth. I said courage. Growth was the word I was thinking about doing for my one word. But because he comes forward pretty much right away. Like, he's pretty clear that he found the credits, he used them to barter and to buy the EOP. And then when the kids kind of call him out on this, he's very straightforward. And I thought the kind of honesty in that situation showed a lot of growth in his character and helped me to continue to trust him.
Okay. I agree. I think Well, he's still a bit of a shady trickster. To this point, he doesn't appear like, if this were, say, Loki, for example, speaking of one of the maybe most famous tricksters in cinema of recent years, I should say, he's leaving him. He's not saving anybody unless it benefits him. Jod maybe is still holding on because he wants more full treasure. Not sure. I think the biggest thing that I would like to talk about with this is the disillusionment of, I was under the pretense, and this is just my own false assumption, that this whole series was about these kids trying to get home, sort of a Lost in Space thing, and hopping from port to port or planet to planet and it making it difficult. They're not home yet, but they're on sort of a shadowy version of their home. So we go back to the last episode, where he gets the map. They get the map from Kime, and they think they're at Attin, but they're not. This is what is the name of this planet? At Akron, Achrann, and this is a world that's in a constant state of war. What I like about this is I like that it feels familiar, but it also feels very different. Chronologically, if it is the same place, which we know it isn't, but it looks like a lot of time has passed. But what do you guys think about this new direction? Because it's not about the kids getting home. I mean, it is still, but they're on a planet for a really long time. That's very similar to Attin, or at least in the same vicinity. So we see again why the celestial map showed, hey, there's a lot of planets that were similar, but they were destroyed or taken off the map. This planet is not destroyed, but does seem to not have much of a sense of civility or a societal construct. How do you guys feel about this new direction?
I think it's a fascinating new direction. It adds another layer of intrigue to this series because I think it is still about all these children trying to get home.
Yes.
But these pieces kind of tie it into the larger Star Wars universe as a whole. We don't quite know what that's going to be, what these connections are, what these other planets are. Hearing the list of the names of these other planets, to me, also developed some intrigue. They all have the same beginning, at, and then an A with something to follow it. And from the very beginning, I thought at Attin might have been like an acronym or something, but that was based solely off of the fact that AT-ATs are often called AT-ATs. And so I was like, well, that's obviously got to be the connection.
The logic is sound.
Yeah. But now it seems like, well, man, maybe now the endings of all of these planet names could reveal something about it. I don't know.
Well, that's clever.
But it did kind of lead to there's some reason all these planets that were hidden have very similar sounding names. And I'm excited to figure out what that is as it goes on.
So fair to say it worked for you, and you
Yes.
and it sort of changed. It gave it another level of intrigue for you. Excellent. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, this new mystery that they've introduced is probably what I'm most interested in now. Is the lore of these planets, or these connecting planets. And what I find so interesting is that the two that we have now visited are complete opposites. You have order and you have chaos. And it's interesting that, that now the children are going to experience, or have now experienced, a sense of chaos. They all seemed very, except for Neel, they all seemed very distraught and like it really threw them off their games and made them start questioning themselves. As in Fern, when they're in the model of the Superior's tower, and
Right.
and she has sort of that, questions herself. But Neel, it seems to it empowers him. And of course, his conversation that he has with Hannah is really, really important. But so, yeah, so I'm curious, like, okay, if this is order and chaos, what are the other planets going to be like, if that's the route, if that's the route they're going to go, or if it was just coincidence that it worked out that way. So very, very, very highly interested.
I'm sort of the opposite. on this for whatever reason. I was really hoping, again, I feel so silly, and I feel like it's very much held at face value. I don't like to have, I try not to expect anything. I just thought that was the direction, so it threw me a little bit. Now I'm reserving judgment. I'm not making a stance either way on it. I will say I noticed it. I will say it definitely puts these children in much more of a perilous manner, like you both were saying. Like the cost seems a lot more real. It's a lot more dangerous. They meet Hannah, who's that young woman from the Troik clan.
Mm-hmm.
And she's also the daughter of the leader. His name is General Strix, Strix. So in General Strix, very much, I found it sort of reminded me of like a weird version of Lord of the Flies, although there were adults on this one. Mm. And he's creepy, but he's also eager to have them help. But then he's basically uses that stick to, he just pounds it on the ground a couple of times. And you have to do what they say. They're giving these kids weapons. Neel is definitely put off by it, very upset by it. Then he forms an interesting bond with this young girl, Hannah. And I think the thing that maybe it didn't take me out of it, but it made me think, okay, this is going to be a little bit different than I expected. Hannah's relationship with Neel is charming and it's cute, but this is where we've got kind of the crux of this thing, because you've got a story with these kids that are basically, they've run off. Well, no, it was sort of an accident, really, but they ran off from their parents. They're far, far away from their homes, and they're in the middle of a war zone. But in the middle of war, there's this cutesy stuff. And I get it, but I also don't get it. So I think I'm sort of having a hard time if the boat is the story and the land is like the reality of story constructs, and the water beneath it is sort of where the imagination flies around. My feet are on both of these, and the boat's kind of going away from the land, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to fall in the boat, fall in the water. Where am I going to go? That's a really convoluted metaphor, but I hope it makes sense.
Sure, that makes sense to me. I think.
Well, maybe you can explain to me, because I don't know what in the heck I just said.
Well, no, I mean, no. You painted the picture in my head. You're doing the splits right now.
I am,
and there's a bit of. I understand what you're saying. I don't know that I feel it that way, but I definitely understand what you're saying. One thing that you were bringing up was sort of, well, I don't know if you were bringing it up, but nonetheless, one thing that I caught when the kids find themselves on this planet and they are, they're really out of place. I went back to, I think it was episode 1, Father Jimmy, when you said wonder, and I said, okay, I'm going to put that filter back on and see what it looks like from the children right now. And I started noticing like Wim wants to play, like he finds the adventure in this, but he's kind of approaching it from a very childlike manner and like still play fighting in this very dangerous place. Whereas Neel is a little bit more cautious, but still going along with it because his buddy's having a good time. But the girls were very much more serious and realizing the peril that they're in. And so I don't know if that really addresses what you're talking about, but shifting that lens really helped me to kind of ground myself into, okay, what are we doing here? So
it helps me make sense of it, actually, because I have to remember this is Star Wars. It's about wars. I mean, the first one's about a war, a galactic civil war. The original Star Wars, of course, from 1977. So I guess it's fairly consistent to that. And again, I don't have a problem with it. I'm just saying it was a little unexpected from the direction that the first 3 were. And in fact, I'll just say now this is my least favorite of the 4 because it just seems a little bit different tonally. But I'm still invested in the characters, and seeing their vulnerability, I think is good, because at its core, this series for me so far is really about these characters. It's not lore bending or lore challenging or additionally adding anything to it, which is fine. I don't need that. I want a good story with good characters, and I'm getting that.
I think for me, Dan, when you just said tonally, it wasn't quite the same. For me, the difference in tone for this episode was that it was more character driven. We saw much more of the growth in all of these characters as they developed. I still felt personally, I felt like it's still kind of consistent with the kind of adventure trying to find their way home type of motif, where
just not in space, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It is. They're still not home, even though it feels like they are.
Right, and so, but yes, so this one, it's just another stop along the way. Like they're almost home, but not really home.
We don't even know if they're in the same time frame. You know what I mean? Maybe this is years after, right? Because there's almost like this weird sense of a lot of time has gone by.
I did not get that sense.
I say that based on like the trees, how they were growing around and through these structures and buildings, and I guess if it is the same as at Attin, then maybe there isn't. But otherwise, it just seems like this planet's seen a lot of wear and tear. And John even says it's like, what does he say? It's ashy when he walks down the ramp, which I thought was showing that there was a lot of destruction here fairly recently. Really interesting. I don't know. It's good. It's good we're talking about it. Tom, what's the next thing you'd like to bring up?
I got a couple things in mind, but let me go this way since I brought it up already. And that's, let's talk about Captain Fern a little bit, because I feel like, interestingly enough, I mentioned the breakdown that she has, and she questions herself, which kind of reminded me of Poe Dameron in the X-Wing and Rise of Skywalker when they're right by Exegol. And he just is kind of like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it just became so overwhelming for him that she becomes the same way. And I think it's her last straw is that SM-33 is not the ally that she felt like. And he keeps saying, I can't say I remember no at Attin. I can't say, and they just want answers. And she becomes so frustrated. But what breaks her out is Wim coming in and like trying to give a compliment, but it doesn't land that way. And she takes it as, you just think I'm going to just suddenly have the answer. I am no droid, which reminds her of what she can do to a droid or with a droid to change programming, which she goes forward, which there she has the answer now all of a sudden.
That was my favorite scene in the whole episode, by the way. Her tears and her vulnerability. And instead of doing this like tough, like showing like she's human, like she's putting on this exterior, but inside she's scared. And I found that so relatable. And she was my favorite part about this whole episode.
Yeah, she was wonderful. And I guess I don't really have much more to say about her other than you could see that building as the episode went. And there were times when she was willing to step back like a good leader will. And there are times when she is driving them forward. And so I think she's actually she really took the captain role and is living up to it, which I'm really enjoying about that.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, and I thought, I agree with both of you. I thought this actress did a great job in that build, kind of the tears, the revealing kind of that very real frustration that, I think we all feel when something's just not quite working. I especially feel it with technology, just as Fern did, even though I'm not dealing with droids. When I can't quite get it to work, I get very frustrated. And I think it's spilled over for her into not just frustration with technology, but it seems she's always been putting herself in these leadership roles and taking these roles, and she wants to be the tough one who's not going to take anything, and especially in comparison to Wim, who always wants to play and have fun.
Yeah, he's the most childish of all of them, easily.
Yeah. Which is why I really also appreciated his moment as well, where he's like, I know I got to go talk to her. He kind of feels it. And I like that it doesn't quite land. He doesn't quite get it right. I thought that was also very well acted and very well written.
I agree. They felt like kids. Like it didn't work. He was awkward, but he's a kid. She's a kid, but she's much more precocious than he is, much more mature. And the fact that she is crying, she's like, I don't want to have all the answers, but I do it because I'm tough, but I'm also doing it because I'm scared. And she's putting on more bravado than she actually has or feels, because that's so realistic. It's so realistic. And I really found that Really, really cool. So I'm glad you brought that up, Tom. Father Jimmy, what's your next one?
My next one. Let's see. Well, do we want to talk about Neel?
Let's talk about Neel.
Neel is a great. Like I said in the beginning of this episode, not just because of the hair. Neel's been one of my favorite characters, and he really showed sort of a lot. Again, this actor who's under this little blue elephant costume, and the puppeteers did a great job.
Robert Timothy Smith is the actor's name.
Okay, great. It was wonderful. It was wonderful, and sort of I felt the realness of his timidity, but also when he feels in the safety of the kind of the camp with the Troik clan, he's able to kind of share his desire for peace, his desire for people to get along. He likes that about Attin, that everything kind of comes together. But yet when he's called upon, he steps forward, and I think he steps forward because he's with his friends. He's doing it with his group of friends. And to me, again, he was again, probably the primary reason I wanted to say courage for this episode.
Which is a great call. And he is the most courageous because, courage is in the absence of fear, but the ability or the perseverance to do it when you are scared, but you don't let it stop you from doing what you need to do or have to. And he's willing to lay down his life for his friends, perhaps, if it gets to that, or he's certainly willing to step up. And that was really, really cool. I think my favorite scene with him was when they're all training and Wim is treating it like it's like they're playing paintball. And I don't think he quite grasped that people could die, including his friends, or that he could die. But Neel picks that blaster up and he holds it probably similar to the way I would hold a calculator or a compass or a protractor. I don't know what to do with this. He just puts it aside. He just it's almost like he's not even fully grasping it with his hands. And that was good acting, good performance by the actor and Robert's voice work. And then of course, everything that ILM is doing. But it really just showed again that I almost expect him to say, I'm a pacifist. At least because at first I thought, maybe, is he a pacifist? Is it just really that? But not really. It's more that he's just scared. Like, he doesn't have the bravado, like, I'm going to run in, I'm going to fight with action figures. I may have been doing that at the bus stop with you at the beginning of this whole adventure, but I'm just a scared kid. And again, very relatable. You guys are helping me make a lot more peace with this episode. So I appreciate that in advance.
It goes, and just to build on that is a couple of moments that really struck with me is he has such an innocent view of peace and war when he says to Hannah, why can't we just be kind to one another? Uh-huh. Which, I mean, how more simple is it? But in the world of adults, it's not always that simple. It should be, but it's not always that simple. And she has the experience that, and she's like, I wish that it could be that way, or whatever she said to that. But she taught him as much as he taught her about living and life and doing the right thing. And I think she was impacted even more than he was impacted by her, based on the ending. Something else you said, Dan, that really really, both of you said this, that really hit home to me right now, but it was resonating with me, but I just didn't know exactly what it was. And that is, it's a timeless theme, but especially in Star Wars, this idea of I'm stronger with my friends, makes me think of Luke in the Emperor's throne room in Return of the Jedi. Your confidence is your failure. Your belief, your faith in your friends is yours. Where no, there's no fault when you have faith in your friends, and so Neel knows that. Luke Skywalker knew it, but wasn't sure how to battle it back. But here, Neel knows that power of friendship and what it takes, and what that can lead you to. So wonderful. I thought about Neel through this, but not quite to this level. So, Father Jimmy, I'm so glad you brought it up and that he's your favorite character, because I wouldn't have thought much more about it than where my brain was. But this is so cool.
It's definitely a Neel focused episode, and he's already developed sort of his own little fan base and sort of a Star Wars subculture and the fandom about him. And his sweetness is really, it's a welcoming, the innocence, I think, is maybe us as Star Wars fans, that innocence, that hope of wanting to feel the way we felt about Star Wars the first time we fell in love with it. And why we are so desperate when it comes to our Star Wars fandom to find a new piece of the Star Wars pie that just really digests well with us. And I think Neel is a nice reminder of what we're all like in that childhood innocence. That really is, there's some joy in there, isn't there?
And when he gets a stuffy trunk when they're walking to the tower, he's like, and it, like little toots of horn when
he sprained his trunk or something like that. Is that what he said?
Yes.
The thing I want to bring up next is Jod. I wanted more Jod. I think I think Jude Law he just chews up scenery. I thought it was very interesting that they chose not to show his bargain with these because the big thing is like, what flag do you fly? I think the fact we don't get to see the bargain and he uses some of those credits, those Republic credits, which are beautiful, by the way. Surely we'll see them at a Star Wars celebration or something like that. There'll be a keychain with the Republic credits on there. And I'll have them. I'll get them. But the fact that we don't see it, and he says it nonchalantly, it's either A, it is at surface value what he has said, or B, maybe there's more to this that meets the eye, which wouldn't be a complete surprise when it is Jod.
I told you I'm suspicious.
No, I know, and you should be. I think we should be, but I also think again, he still tries to help them, and the way that he takes care of SM-33, who was so frightening at the end of this, by the way. Interesting, very interesting stuff. I think he got the least amount of stuff to do, and maybe we'll see more impact later. But I thought it was cool to see the dynamic between him and SM-33, because I thought initially when he thought that Jod was a thief, which he is, that Jod was going to reprogram him right there or do something with him right there. But he doesn't mess with him at all. Maybe he doesn't have that talent or capability to do it. Maybe he wants to see what's happening, or maybe there's more to him than that. But this confusing thing about SM-33, and then again, we get this other excellent cliffhanger. I actually said a lot, oh, and Mason said, what, Dad? And I said, well, that's the cliffhanger. He goes, but we don't really have the cliffhanger. They're safe. I said, yes, that's true. They are safe. But what is going on? Who was SM-33's previous master? And how much that is ingrained? And is that going to be a problem later? I don't know. But I enjoy that wrinkle.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Tom.
Oh, I was just going to say very quickly that I don't know, something about SM-33 and where we left him. I'm waiting for a KB SM-33 centric episode. It's coming.
Oh,
yeah. With him being able to so quickly leap and turn off the droid. First of all, I kind of was like, I've never thought about droids as having just an obvious on-off switch. and
it's almost a little too easy. It was almost a little too easy.
And it led to kind of another level of intrigue on what's going on with Jod's past, because he has that one episode where there's some lines of dialogue where he really doesn't trust droids. He doesn't seem to like them. But yet when he's tracking down SM-33 on Port Borgo, was that at the pirate port?
Yes.
He knows how to turn on and off all these different droids. He kind of is very adept at that, very quick. He was very quick here to know where the off switch was and able to kind of do it in a dive roll kind of fashion.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, it was fun. It was fun to see, but also thought this is almost too easy. Is there another part of a plan? I don't want to speculate, but we don't have enough information yet. I actually don't have a ton more to say about this episode, to be honest. So I'm just going to turn it over to you guys. If there's any other key points that you want to bring up. I do think we probably need to spend just a little bit of time here on Hana and this Troy clan situation with their dad, General Strix. Any thoughts on any aspect of those key moments in this episode?
Regarding the Troiks in general and the kind of state of at Akron, on one hand, I didn't quite get the whole story of what's going on. It seemed we were kind of dropped in the middle of it, but I was also okay with that. One of the things that I've liked about, especially the original Star Wars movies, is you get these really cool references, really cool characters that just kind of show up. They seem very well thought out and defined, but yet you don't know everything. And like with Boba Fett, it always comes to mind. We didn't really know much about him besides he was an awesome character that was in for a little bit. And that sort of has spawned so much fan talk, and that's the kind of stuff I like, kind of the imagination that comes into the wondering of the what ifs.
Yeah.
And so this planet, I was okay not knowing the whole story.
Yes.
I just found an irony with the Troik clan in that they lived in a school, and that they what they learned there was survival and how to shoot weapons.
Violence.
Exactly the opposite of what they do on at Attin. So I don't know, that just kind of struck me when they're like, well, that I know that place, that's our school. And I'm like, oh, that's where the Troiks call home. So I don't know, for what it's worth. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I think I think you both just sort of helped me sort of supplant why I have some challenge with this. And I think it's because the idea of kids being on their own in space, trying to get home and running into different ports and this and that, it's almost like the Odyssey, but it's with the kids. We've never really seen anything like that in the scope. But I feel like I've seen times where you go to planets and there's natives there that are restless and they're aggressive, and you've got to barter with them or they'll keep you prisoner. I feel like I've seen that a lot. And just in stories and storytelling. And I think maybe that's where a little bit of a natural tendency, kind of hit my mind. I think Hana's cool. I thought she was, obviously the actor who plays Hana was awesome and very fit. And there seemed to be a little extra jumping and flipping around that really wasn't necessary. But I guess if I could do that, I would probably do it all the time too. I'd come in to make a copy in the library and flip over your desk or something like that if I could. So you have that to look forward to if I ever complete my training. But it was, I don't know. I'm just not quite sold. And I think Hana in here with Neel was meant to show us Neel's soft side, which we already sort of knew was there, but to really flesh it out. That was a nice sort of balm for this backdrop of this really terrible place where there a lot of kids are being forced to fight and take on leadership positions. In fact, her dad says, you're an adult. You're on here with us. You're in this war. You're an adult. You have to fight. And that kind of stuff that happens in the real world. And that's really, really scary. So it was harder for me to find Hana to be as vulnerable and have this tender side because of what she's around all the time. But maybe not. I mean, I guess plenty of people grow up in difficult situations or have a lot of trial and tribulations and challenging things happen, but they still maintain their essence of who they are and are able to maintain a little bit of that innocence. So maybe that's something that works, if I'm making any sense at all.
Yeah, and something that really stuck out to me with Hana is that she's a child on this war-torn planet, and she's expected to be, as you mentioned, the leader and all of those things, and she's capable.
Yes.
But she still has the childlike wonder or the childlike dream of when I'm in charge, and when I'm in charge, that she still dreams just like any other kid does. And so I found that to be, I don't know, when we talk about, Star Wars and the theme of hope, I felt like that's what gave her hope. But in the context of this show, it's a child that's dreaming just like the main characters are.
And you know what? I think she just made me sad, because when she talked about growing up, I found it to be somewhat ironic, because I have a hard time believing if she continues to live in this war-torn place with these adults as her role models and protectors, that she's not going to make it. That's kind of that. It made me depressed a little. It made me a little sad, because I thought it doesn't seem like she's going to have any fortune, because it's just not a good place for a kid to be. And I'm probably being a little too sensitive to it for whatever reason. What do you think, Father Jimmy?
I think with this war-torn planet, the Troiks, like I said, I didn't need to know everything. I don't need to know the whole background, how long this war's been going on, or what started it. But some of the interior way that the Troiks kind of lived, I didn't always understand. I didn't quite get. It seems first we're introduced to them as almost like this tribe of children that are warring. But then we find out there's adults with General Strix and a couple of others. And there's a moment, it was on one hand like a sweet moment when they're in kind of the chow line, the food line. And
the chow, yes, with the green mush.
Yeah. and he gives it away to these children that were there. And I kind of didn't understand, were they supposed to be starving children that didn't have food? And that didn't make sense to me, because you have these strangers that come in and can just walk up and get food, because it seems like everyone's involved. And yeah, so some of that stuff, I didn't quite get it.
See, I thought in that, I'm sorry to interrupt, I thought that was everybody gets one portion. They're kids. They're still hungry. That's not enough food to get them by. So Neel was giving what he had so they could have a little bit more, so they could come close to actually being satiated.
Yeah, but in general, I thought the whole thing with the planet they're on, like we were talking about, being war-torn and very opposite of at Attin itself. It is an interesting concept. I don't think it's designed as at Attin's the peaceful planet and at Akron's the war planet.
I agree.
For me, I kind of got the sense that once they kind of stopped this system of having these hidden planets, that some of them got destroyed, at Attin remained hidden, and then others like at Akron just were left to their own devices, left to kind of fend for themselves. Which kind of explains sort of why it was how it was, because kind of just left into chaos to run itself.
Right. And that's another, I think that's another part of it. I'm not convinced that I care about this planet. I'm not as invested in what's going on here as I am these kids getting home. And because it seems like there's enough richness around their planet itself and Jod and what motivates him. I'm more interested in that than these new wrinkles. But that's not to say it won't serve the story, and I'm very much eager to see where it's going to go. So with that, if we don't have anything else to talk about, I think we're ready for letter grades. And I'll just go first. Building on what I just said, I'll give it a very, very generous B. I could easily give it a B-, because as I just mentioned, while I appreciate what's going on and I reserve the right to see where it goes, I wasn't as interested in this new wrinkle. And I liked the character stuff a lot, which we mentioned and highlighted, and I spoke about the things that really moved me. With Fern and Neel, those were the best parts. But I hope we get back to kind of the core of what I felt the first 3 episodes were about, which is them on the ship in sort of a piratey adventure, trying to get home, not hanging out in some war-torn place. I feel like I've seen that already in other things. and I like the newness that the first 3 episodes brought. So I'll give it a very, very generous B.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are. With Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
So we're halfway, is that right? This is episode 4?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to give it, I want to give it a higher mark, but I really can't. I don't think so, and I'll explain why. I give it a B as well. I really wanted to give it a B plus just because it's riding in the coattails of 3 really exceptional episodes. But I think this conversation is what took me from giving it a B plus, because I became so much more interested in the lore of Attin and these planets that I kind of lost focus of the kids and what we're doing. When you said they're trying to, they're on this trip to try to figure out how to get back home, I was kind of like, oh yeah, huh. Because I'm sort of more bought in that they are on an adventure now and they're discovering things. Now, granted, they're discovering things about their own home, and it's the puzzle pieces they're putting together to get back home, but I completely forgot about that. And so I'm going to have to give it a B. I enjoyed it. We developed some characters as we talked today. I'm dying to know what happens with SM33. He's become just like many of the droids that they introduce. He's so uncharming. I don't know. he's something, but I really like him, and I think he has a story to tell. And I think it started to come out here, but it got blocked by a former programmer. So we'll have to see what happens.
Very good. I'm surprised by your grade, but I like that. I appreciate your perspective. One thing I want to point out before we get Father Jimmy's grade, we got to see the first high five in Star Wars, I think. Was it the first high five, or was there one in Phantom Menace? No, wait, I think there's one with Anakin and his friends around when they're building the pod.
Yeah.
The pod. Yeah. But still, it was pretty fun. And again, as you mentioned earlier, Father Jimmy, babysitter mode, big fan.
Yeah.
Big fan. That was funny. Okay, Father.
I gave it an A minus. I was kind of waffling between A minus, B plus, but I felt the character growth was really good. I really loved how we saw sort of growth in Neel. We saw some vulnerability in Fern. We saw Wim kind of stepping out there to help Fern. We see Jod, again, not still 100% certain where he's at, but we saw him at least come clean about taking the money, and he seemed to do it in a manner to care for these kids. But like we were talking about, there's a couple of things that didn't quite land. I think in comparison to the other episodes, it didn't quite sit as strongly, but I still thought it was some really well-written parts. I thought, the callback to that first episode where Fern kind of tricks her droid into tricking her mom was a cool piece of foreshadowing that got revealed. And that made me interested in watching the series again to see if there's other little breadcrumbs early on that'll show up later. But again, overall, I liked it. I've liked this whole series, but this one I gave it an A minus.
So we'd love to know what everybody else thinks who's listening to this episode. What do you think about this episode of Skeleton Crew, the 4th episode? Or what do you think about this series overall? Every week on Facebook, in the CWK Cafe, I post a place for you to give your spoiler-free thoughts and comments, purely because I know not everybody can get to the show right away, and I want them to be able to enjoy, social media and other things if they haven't gotten to see it. And then on Saturday mornings, you can give your spoiler-filled thoughts, and that's where you can write your reviews, and everybody can share and interact and comment, which we really like doing. And I really liked talking with the two of you. You helped me to kind of explain. I knew there were some things that worked and some that didn't quite connect for me. So thank you both for helping me figure that out. Tom, as always, thanks for being on. Please let everybody know where they can find you and what's going on with Teachers in the Dungeon.
Absolutely. We're wrapping up the year. We just did our last playthrough, and so we recapped our most recent. And I know you'd be surprised to hear this, Dan. Dan Ream pulled off a great horror series. So, and we had just talked about that on the show about a month ago. So that, and then Seeking Positivity in the Galaxy, my blog, is wrapping up the year as well with my traditional top digital trading cards in Bunt, Star Wars Card Trader, and Marvel Collect.
Pretty fun. And you're enjoying the daily holiday cards that are coming out too?
Oh yes, we're day 4 or 5, somewhere around there. Yeah. So yeah. Oh yes. Loving those as always, and
Fun.
Loving all of my Christmas albums this month.
Oh yes, which we had a great time talking about on CWK Pour-Over.
We did.
Which I know Father Jimmy is an avid consumer of, a very important member of the CWK Alliance. Father Jimmy, you have any reviews for us? Any suggestions for us on these recent pour-overs? What would you like to hear from the trio of goofy goofballs?
Well, I am interested in your end of the year recap. I don't think you guys have done that yet with all your goals that you set forward.
We're actually recording that after today's show.
Great. Well,
yes,
I'm on the edge of my seat. So that's good. I've really, Tom, enjoyed when you guys talk about your blog and the albums. I was checking that out recently, and that was. And now I actually started in my car, just listening to a whole album all the way through.
Nice.
Instead of skipping channels, getting mad at all the ads that pop up on Spotify.
Oh, that's
Excellent.
so cool. And of course, you're very, very busy with Advent, and we appreciate all that you do for everybody in your parish, for sure.
Yeah, thank you. We just had our school's Christmas pageant this evening. All the kids did a wonderful, wonderful job. It was a great evening.
Oh, that's so great. I love it. Thank you so much to Father Jimmy and Tom for joining me to talk about the 4th episode of Skeleton Crew. Very interesting episode, and I like how we have these different opinions, but we all come together because it's more about friendship and community than anything else, and you help represent that with what you do on CWK Cafe, the Facebook group. If you're a member of the CWK Alliance, find out more at coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance. And just your overall awesome. I want to say, this is probably, I think this is going to be the last, well, is it the last show? Yeah, it's the last show before Christmas. So a very Merry Christmas to all of you. I hope you have a wonderful time with your family and friends. And as I said at the top of the show, the next 2 weeks, the shows are going to come out on Fridays instead of their normal Thursdays, just because it's the holiday season. So hoop-de-doo. Oh, I almost started singing that song. No, because we're going to spend time with our family and friends, and for Father Jimmy with his parish. So we're not going to be able to record our normal times because they're going to be, usually we record earlier in the week, and we can't do that because of Christmas and Christmas Day and Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. So we'll have the shows next Friday. Thank you so much, everybody. Again, enjoy your Merry Christmas and have a happy, safe, and healthy New Year, and I will talk to you real soon. This is Dan Zehr reminding you that this is the podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars related items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.